Welcome back to Danny Rants. Today I have an old friend, and a lot of people have been wondering where this guy is, but I'll introduce him very quickly. Mike Metro, old legal name, Michael Metropolis, is sitting with me today. So I've been wanting to get him down for a while. We've been kind of working back and forward to make this happen, and we are now making it happen. So Mike, how are you today?
Very well, thanks, Danny. Yourself?
Not bad. For those that don't know who you are, a little bit of wrap up obviously is that you were a DJ sort of what, 2005 or maybe long 2009 maybe?
Probably 2009 to 2013 probably would have been my peak, if you can even call it that. But
Yep.
yeah.
And you were playing, when you say you can't, yeah. So I reckon you're talking yourself down there. A lot of people knew who you were, and I reckon one of my most common questions is, where the fuck is Mike Metro? So I might even title this podcast that. He's here right in front of us, guys. So anyway, you used to play, and kind of originally you were playing like kind of hard, not hard style, but like hard, what would you call it?
I don't even know. It was sort of started off with that electro sound and it morphed into something a little bit kind of darker and heavier. But yeah, I don't even know. It was literally its own genre. You know, it was born out of Corova and that sort of era, but
didn't really have a name.
No.
Yep. And then you kind of finished off your career, I guess, before you disappeared into the mist as like a house DJ.
Yep.
Yep. Sweet. So we're going to go through this whole thing and start from start. So beginning, not where you grew up or anything like that. I don't do that bit, but like you start working in the scene. Probably the first thing I want to talk about is, which I don't think a lot of people would know, but you actually were born into the industry. So you were born into clubbing. If you want to give us a little bit of a wrap up about your old man, I know you just sort of were doing it prior to the show, and explain to people like, I guess you're growing up and how your dad was involved in the scene.
Yeah, I mean, by the time I came around, Dad was pretty much out of the club scene. It was more so kind of in the 80s. I was born in 91, so it was sort of in the 80s that he was involved in clubs. He had the Chevron, Metro, he had Heat at Crown for a little bit. So by the time, you know, he settled down and had kids, he was sort of on the way out. He had a couple of restaurants and bars and stuff, but yeah, so I didn't really, wasn't really that, you know, wasn't present for me, as in, I wasn't around the club stuff, and I think that was intentional. By the time he had kids, he really wanted to kind of step away from it. But when he found out that I got into DJing, he'd be like, oh, you know, I'll hook you up and I'll, you know, get you into this club and that club. And being the stubborn mule that I am, I was like, nah, Dad, I want to do my own thing. I want to carve my own path. And yeah.
So he didn't help you?
Look, he did. He tried to, but I was just, I was stubborn. I didn't want people to think, oh, he's just getting gigs because his dad knows people in the industry. So I kind of actively tried to go in the other direction. But not only that, the sort of contacts that he had in the club scene was not the sort of venues that I wanted to be involved with. I wanted something a little bit more sort of underground, where his contacts were real kind of mainstream people.
It's kind of funny. So I don't know if you know this. So I might be telling you this for the first time, but I remember getting hit up by Luka Dorovich, who's much the same as you, like family friends, obviously. But he was born into the club world and still is. He's the owner of Lucky and Billboard and whatnot. And he was like, hey, got this kid. His name's Mike Metropolis back then. He's like, music's too heavy for us. Would you look at him? And then that's how I sort of was introduced to you. I didn't know your dad was working in clubs at that point, but it was sort of like you were given to me from basically another, like, I don't even know what you'd call them, sort of like club. I would call them royalty, but I'm sure you probably wouldn't say that. But it's like you, yourself, and the guys you grew up with, they're majority of the kids that you kind of knew in the club world, they were other club kids whose families had kind of worked in the industry, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Dad and Luke. My dad and Luke's dad sort of went to high school together and, you know, been best mates forever. So
Did they go to high school together?
Yeah, I think they even went to primary school together. They've known each other since they were like 5 years old or something.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting as. And there were some other club families too you hung around with back in the day?
I'm trying to think.
Boutique owner?
Hey?
Boutique owner?
Oh, Boutique Razzle, yeah, was one of Dad's good friends. There's a few others, George Zagoulis and, you know, other sort of people here and there. But yeah, it was just the norm.
I know it's normal for you, so that's why I'm going to pinch into it. But like, what was it like growing up in sort of that environment, you know, like with all these guys who were club owners or music guys and whatnot? It's not a normal thing. For my kids, they're about to go through it, you know, and all the guys I knock around with the club owners and their kids know each other. But like, what was it like being on the other spectrum of that?
Look, like I said, I think because Dad was mainly out of it by the time I was growing up, it wasn't a huge thing. I mean, my parents split up when I was fairly young, and I always lived with my dad and his parents, so my grandparents. And I guess, you know, probably intentionally on my dad's behalf, he tried to sort of shield me from some of that potentially shady side of the, you know, nightlife and all that kind of stuff. And he just wanted to give me and my sisters a really normal life. And, yes, I guess my grandparents sort of provided that stability and that normality for us kids. So yeah, I didn't really realize, and it wasn't until I was a bit older and I kind of look back and I'm like, yeah, that was it is a bit unusual,
Yeah.
given what my dad did and all that kind of stuff for work. But yeah, at the time, it just felt really normal.
It's kind of weird because today my daughters, I rocked up and I had like flame pants on and like a green jacket, the one I was wearing before. And I was on the phone and then my daughters were saying that I'm a lot different than the other dads. I'm like, how? And they're like, just look at you. I was like, okay, hopefully that doesn't, like they don't grow up being scarred by it. So that's half the reason why I asked that question.
Yeah, no, look, to be honest, like probably wouldn't have wanted to admit it at the time, but I thought it was cool. I'm like, no, my dad's cool. You
Yeah.
know? Like I was sort of proud of him in a way, and I'm sure your kids would be the same about
Fingers
you.
crossed. So you go through that, you grow up with it. Obviously, you're hearing all these tales and stuff from your dads or your kind of uncles and your dad's family friends and whatnot. Did that make you more sort of like attract you to the lifestyle? Because obviously you got in pretty early. Like I was probably like 18 when I met you, I reckon, or you were 18, I should say. Do you think that the way that you'd grown up and the people that you knew and the paths that they took sort of attracted you to what you went into?
Not really, to be honest. I guess in high school, I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do. Like I loved music, but not necessarily dance music, which is a bit ironic that I ended up in that. I more so loved, my blues and, even jazz and that sort of stuff. So it would have been my dream to have been like a blues guitarist, but I'm a mediocre guitarist at best and can't sing to save myself. So the dance sort of stuff kind of just, it's a bit of a journey as to how I got there. But yeah, I don't think my dad or anything like that really, definitely didn't steer me in that direction. If anything, he tried to encourage me to just take a normal path, go to uni, get a normal job. But I think by the time before I'd finished year 12, I probably would have been 17. I was already, playing at Corova and stuff like that. So
sorry, what?
I think I had to get a stat deck or something signed. And
I doubt it. Let's be honest.
Let's be honest. It wasn't super legit. But look, no, by the time I finished year 12, I was already like playing in clubs regularly. And at the time, I'm like, yeah, I've made it. Even though I'm getting paid like $50 an hour to play an opening set at Corova. At that time in my life, I'm like, this is awesome. I'm going to make a career out of this. I'm going to kill it. And so I kind of just kept on going with that because I already had my foot in the door, but it was never really part of the plan to begin with.
Yeah, wow. And you did. Like, how long did you end up doing it full time for?
Probably about 8 years, I would say.
So what's that? You're talking 24, 25, sort of when you hang the headphones up?
Yeah, it would have been about 25.
Yeah.
When I hung it up. Yeah.
Kind of going on that, because obviously there's this point where you just literally disappear off the face of the planet. So prior to that, like when you were DJing, there's some highlight points during that period? I know there was a lot of dark times too, which we'll touch on. Yeah. But were there some highlight points that, I guess accolades or anything that you can remember back on fondly?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, not that it's the most exciting thing in the world, but I mean it honestly when I say like those early days at Corova and that kind of thing were for me the most enjoyable parts of my whole DJ career, because one, it was all new and novel and exciting, and it was this sound and it was that crew of DJs that we had at the time that were making a really unique sound. And this is before SoundCloud or anything. And I remember guys like, Mickey Knox and the like used to tell me, when it comes to producing your own music, don't give it to anyone, don't put it online, don't do anything. Like, keep the stuff for your sets, and that's what's going to make people come and watch you. And it sort of worked. Had this, not just me, but that whole crew was like a bit of a cult following. And even though it was a small little hole in the wall, it was exciting, man. I'd look forward to it all week. And it might sound lame or sad, but like at the time, that was, for me, it was exciting. And I mean, Billboard and stuff like that. I guess the connection with Luke. I just liked playing at the clubs where I knew, I had mates there and all that. But I mean, so many good memories. Even like towards the end, the tail end, when I teamed up with Boppy and did,
For those who don't know, Boppy is Benson.
Benson, yeah, we had Dance Cult Project at the end. That was fun. We did a couple of interstate gigs and stuff like that. That was fun, and I'm still mates with him. So lots of highlights.
Yeah, and like I don't think it is lame talking about that thing, because like even me, like I've done massive stuff, small stuff, whatever, but like that bubbling time when we were effectively like paving a way that made no sense and it felt like us against the world, like it was fucking amazing. Like there's no denying that, and it was a sound that was created here that was only really big here, that only people cared about here. Like the whole thing was unique, and like I would not like to imagine there would be, obviously there would be, but there might be like tens of people, like different cities or whatever that went through that process. Like it's a very unique situation. Like it's not something that happens every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was crazy to be involved in, right?
Yeah.
Another one I'm going to bring up because you brought it up before and I thought it was fucking interesting. So how did you get your name, Mike Metro?
So my name at birth is Michael Metropolis. So Metropolis being a name of Greek origin. And I remember when my mate George, we used to DJ together and he'd bust your balls as well.
Yeah, I made you break up with him, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So, you know, we'd basically bust your balls until you gave us a gig.
What was your name then again?
When George and I teamed up, it was Acid Faces.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Acid Faces.
I didn't even know what acid was at the time. I just thought it sounded cool.
Do you remember Apostle used to always be like, acid on their faces?
Yeah, so we started at Acid Faces, but then you weren't a huge fan of George, so you kind of made me break up with him and just do my own thing. And you're like, so what's your name going to be? What are you going to put on the fly? And I'm like, I don't know, just my name, Michael Metropolis. And I remember you didn't want to come across like rude or anything, so you go, oh, you know, look, don't take this the wrong way, no offense, but, you know, it's probably not a great look having like a big woggy name on the flyer.
Too many letters, man.
Yeah. And I just laughed. I go, no, I get where you're coming from. I said, what do you suggest? And you go, I don't know, just shorten it. Like Metropolis, just make it Metro, call yourself Mike Metro. And I was like, yeah, whatever. So I ran with that for years, but I always hated it. Like I kind of wished that I came up with a better name.
Bro, I love it. I can do it now. Every time I'm like, obviously I didn't know that I created it. That's probably why I like it. But I'm like, every time I think about it, I'm like, fucking what a good name. Like it was such an easy, catchy name. Like no one's forgotten it. If that makes sense. It's not like you're sitting there going like, I did that not just to you, but like John Doe, that was like through my team. But I was like, bro, you can't be called Vadim Golikov. Like it's too long on a flyer. Like back then, it wasn't as easy as like AI creating them either. So it was like those extra letters would cost us money.
Very true.
And there was like Dean Paps, who's not his real name. He's like Dean Papadopoulos, I think it is. Sorry if I got that wrong.
Papadopoulos.
Yeah, Papadopoulos, sorry, yeah. And then you had like Adam Bartolo, which is Adam Barta. So it was very common back then to like, funnily enough, there was a lot of Greek Italian DJs, but they all had to shorten their names. So I'm kind of defending myself on this one, but it was the industry norm back then.
Yeah.
So you go through this whole process and you kind of like, I would say, like I know you would argue with this because you always talk it down on yourself, but you were sort of still on the cusp of growing. Like you kind of gone through, you've done your heyday, you were pretty big in your early stages in Melbourne. You kind of broke in, you were doing stuff with Benson, there was Say What, there was Medium Rare Records. You're starting to make your name and you're working with guys like, you know, hanging around or knocking around with the guys like Peking Dark, Motez, a bunch of other guys. I'm sure there was other guys that I'm not mentioning. And you were kind of on the cut, even Dom and Torrin, all those guys. You're on the kind of cusp. You actually went and worked with, after Life with Mr. Rance, you went and worked with James Faber, who's Dom Dollar's manager. Correct me if I'm wrong?
Correct.
You did, yep. So you're sort of on the cusp of growth, and then you decide to just disappear. So like you've gone from growing into potentially being maybe arguably, like I know again, you would hate me saying this, but one of Australia's bigger names. You're doing stuff with Triple J, rah, rah, rah. I'm giving you a fucking complete and massive wrap up here. And you just decide to drop off the face of the earth. So can you kind of run us how that decision comes about? And I know it's a long, long story of like, you know, of dark days and happy days, but what makes you do this?
Yeah, I can see how from the average punter's perspective, it would have seemed like I just dropped off the face of the earth, but it was definitely a sort of something that happened over a couple of years. I mean, you can probably attest to this as well. And James' favourite, it ties back to what I said earlier about never being super passionate about dance music in the beginning. I feel like I landed myself in this position where I had eyes on me and had great opportunities and all that sort of stuff. But because I wasn't passionate about the music, it started to feel like a chore. You know, you'd be pushing me and, you know, James later on or labels would be pushing me like, man, you know, you've got this platform, just where's this, we need some music, like, you know. But I struggled to motivate myself to write the music because I didn't love it. But I think where it sort of started to head in a different direction, got into a relationship with my now beautiful wife, Jade. We were sort of dating and I guess life changed drastically. As you know, when I first started DJing Corova and stuff, I would live and breathe clubs and I'd love just, you know, going out and partying, and that was my lifestyle. I'd sleep all week and I'd be this vampire. But I guess, you know, you grow up a little bit, your friends move on and they're all working normal jobs, and then I found myself with a long-term serious relationship and I didn't want to be hungover every weekend and laying in bed doing nothing. So started settling down a bit then. Also, I had a bit of an issue. I don't want to say an issue with alcohol because I don't want to dramatize it, but I would binge drink on weekends and stuff like that. And I sort of got to a point where I tried to moderate my drinking and partying, but I guess I'm an all or nothing person. It got to a point where I was like, right, for my own health and for the, benefit of my, lifestyle in general, I need to stop drinking. So I cut that out. And then it became quite apparent to me very quickly that that whole DJing thing and the momentum that I had behind me, it was pretty much like I liked the lifestyle and it was fun. But when I stopped the drinking, the partying side of it, I'm looking around, I'm like, what am I doing? I don't like this. I don't like the music. Um, so, but because I had the momentum, I kept going because I'm like, well, I don't know what else I'm going to do now. And my mates are looking at me going, you're living the dream. You're getting paid the same or more than us working as electricians or whatever to play music. You're traveling interstate. You're living the life. So I kind of kept it going for a while because I thought I'd be stupid not to. But then it got to a point where I'm like, I don't love this anymore. I would rather give these opportunities to some young kid who actually loves the music and really wants this and is a talented producer and blah, 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 blah. And because I hadn't released music for a while, that momentum can only last for so long. As you know, if you don't release music for a while, at some point people are like, you're done. It's over. And I think because I had that reputation in the early days for being a bit of a party boy, for lack of a better term, promoters, sure, they would book me to DJ, but I was also, I would be kind of partying as well. And so when I stopped drinking, wasn't releasing music, the gigs just, I was getting booked less and less and less. And it got to a point where I was like, I need to change. And Jade was just working an office job that she didn't really like. She got made redundant and got a decent little payout. And she's like, right, do you want to move interstate? Do you want to move to Byron Bay? Because we'd sort of holidayed there a few times. And I was at the point where I was ready to kind of hang up the headphones. And I thought, yeah, there's no time better than now. So we moved up there, did the hippie thing for a while, lived out of a van and kind of cruised around there. And I'd still occasionally get booked, like
I remember,
interstate here and there. But yeah, got to a point I was like, yeah, time to move on. And I got a job at a tattoo shop up there in Lennox Head and then sort of just
went on this journey.
Yeah,
the second part of this journey.
Yeah.
So why this is a unique story and why I kind of bring it up is that I've actually touched on this before, where people will get into music like you did because they want to party and they want to hang out, do whatever. And then as time goes along, like you said, their friends drop off. Then they sort of realize that the music they're making or the lifestyle they're living, they don't like. It's not uncommon. But what is uncommon is that they stop. Yeah, that's the thing. So there's guys that I know who are older than me who still work in music, who I know don't give a fuck about music. They're not powered by that. Yeah, and also successful. They're very successful people. There's a lot of people I know who make music who don't like the music they make, but they're just like, well, this is my thing. I've got to continue on. So why it's an interesting thing and why I wanted to touch on it is that people look on from the outside in, like you spoke about your friends, and they're like, oh, this is this fucking dream lifestyle. But what they don't know is that some people don't think it is. Yeah, they're just sort of much the same as if you hated your job as an electrician. You grow up, your sound taste changes, all this stuff happens. But if you get stuck in a niche, you can't leave it. And if you change that niche, you lose your fan base. You basically straight away, you ostracize these people, you lose the income. You've got to take a risk to kind of potentially go forward or fall backwards. And that risk is normally too high for people. And that's why I guess a lot of people probably the whole disappeared out of nowhere thing. Because you're on the come up and it sort of felt like you did. You had the name, you had the ability to make music, you were signing to the right record labels, you're doing everything right to then decide kind of in a sense, which it was you kind of let it go. Yeah. And obviously now you've explained why, but I guess it's such a unique story because most don't. Yeah. Most are your age now still making tunes and doing things they don't necessarily like. And I guess it's a credit to you, from a bravery point of view that other than you, I don't really know. Oh, Stevie Mink kind of got over it. Yeah. But there's not a lot of people who just stop at the top in a sense. I don't know you'd say you didn't stop at the top, but you were growing. Yeah. And traditionally people kind of get forced out. They don't decide to leave.
And look, I know a lot of people in my position that may have gone on to, work in labels or work in management or work
sound
in
engineers.
music in some capacity. And I don't know, I just had this weird thing of I don't want to be this old dude in the club scene or the music scene. I don't know, I just had this, I don't want to be that guy, especially if I don't have the passion for it. Not that there's anything wrong, by the way, with old dude, but I don't know, I just thought, I don't want to be that guy.
Apology accepted.
If I don't want to continue down that path, I've got to make a change. And
it's interesting though, even myself, I've had 3 points where I've decided I'm going to leave. But what's weirdly for my story is that I do. So I start to step out and then I quickly realized that I don't. Yeah. So then I step back in. So I reckon it was up until 30, I was sort of in, out a little bit, never fully. And I had these dreams and aspirations of leaving and working normal, which people probably find strange, but I wanted to be normal in a sense. And then over time, I realized that I'm not, like, it's not for me. Yeah. Like, so music now, if anything, I'm more powered in it. Like, I more want to be involved in it more heavily than I've ever have been. But I've had that same journey too. Yeah. And so when you did leave, did you ever have that same sort of feeling where you had that allure kind of calling you back, or was it just, nah, that's it, snapped off?
Not at all, to be honest. Never really, I've never really desired to go back to it. Like, I did a gig not too long ago at Made in Melbourne. That was just, just for a bit of fun, but I've never had the thought where I wanted to go back. And I think another thing that didn't really, it only struck me after I kind of left, was that when music is your job and you've got an agent and a manager and all that kind of stuff, there's a certain pressure there. And once that all dropped off and I got a normal job and made income through a regular job, I actually thought, now I can go back to music, which was a passion for me, and just enjoy it. And there's no pressure. I don't have to feel like I need to release music. I can just pick up a guitar, play some shit blues lick over and over again and noodle around. And that's fun for me. And that's, when there's no pressure, when it's not your job, it actually makes it more enjoyable. But yeah, in terms of going back to it as a career, it's never really crossed my mind.
Do you think the pressure like made your lifestyle choices towards the end? Because I know you were talking about, not that to over exaggerate it, but you were sort of in this cycle, which a lot of people get into, where it's just you live for the weekend, get trashed, repeat. Do you think the pressure sort of emphasized that, or not really? It was just the way you were living at the time?
I think it was just the way I was living at the time. And because, as I said, I went straight from year 12 at school into full-time DJing clubs. I never really had that normal experience that most people have of like, you get your first job at Macca's or whatever, and you kind of learn to, you get your pocket money, and then I never had that. I pretty much went straight into DJing, and so that lifestyle was sort of all I knew.
Yeah, true. That's a really good point. Hey, like most people have to like earn it. Like you talk about guys, and I mentioned him before, but like Motez, he wasn't getting any form of gigs at all until he was 30 years old. Like obviously you've been trying for 12 years, even guys like Dom and whatnot. It's like over time, it's very kind of rare that at 18 you break it big. And there's not a lot. Like I'm thinking for you, Joel, like there's a small handful of people that blow up in their teens, if that makes sense. Like traditionally it's like kind of 30s in a sense, which is kind of strange. So from there, you go into like a bit of a journey. So you go from this party lifestyle, you're hanging around with us at nightclubs, early hours in the morning. And I remember vividly, I couldn't call you till 5 p.m. because you were never ever awake. Like you lived the complete opposite lifestyle of a normal human, I would say. And you were sort of, during the weekend you were fully active, on the weekend you were basically a part-time sloth. Making music, doing all this stuff, kind of living like essentially a rock star lifestyle. Have to mention some of your fashion statements where arguably I don't think anyone was wearing the clothes that you were. Can you actually touch on that a little bit? Like what made you, for people that don't know, Mike used to wear like top hats, and I don't even know how you explain your fashion. It wasn't like, you can't kind of pinpoint it to one thing. Like what powered you to sort of go down that angle? Because you were definitely as well known for your music, probably more well known for your fashion than you wear your music.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess I've always, I've never been shy to kind of dress the way I feel and, a little bit out of the norm. I used to be obsessed with Russell Brand, so I think he was a bit of an influence, wearing just like ridiculous, like leopard print blazers and sequins and top hats. And I remember like having, you'd book me gigs out in like Mildura at some pub in the middle of nowhere. No one would have a clue who I am. But to keep up that kind of look, I'd still wear my whole get up. And I remember walking back like from the club to the hotel, and these dudes that were like almost passed out in the gutter, they probably got knocked back from the club. A whole bunch of them were like, "Hey, Willy Wonka, where you going?" And I'm like, I just pretend I didn't hear him, just gun it straight for the hotel. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it came from, to be honest. But I think I realized maybe it wasn't a conscious thing, but I just sort of realized that part of being, a musician or a DJ, you've got to have some kind of image. And remember my logo was like a little Willy Wonka style font.
Yep, I do.
So it all kind of just tied in with that, I think.
Yeah.
And part of a branding thing.
And something that's like a little bit art die. Like a lot of people ask me like for advice, and that's one of those things. Like you did it really well early. Like you kind of came in, you looked the same as every other kid. You were, as you said, like literally looked the same as every other kid there. Quickly kind of decided to make your own remixes and make your own songs. Changed your fashion, had a logo, had a name that was catchy, and it's like it pretty quickly caught on fire for you. But there was no other you. Yeah, like they were same as Mickey Knox or same as these other guys, or be it Flume or fucking doesn't matter who they are. Even using Adam Hyde as an example from Peking Dark, you don't forget them. Yeah, like, and that's one of those things I always say to kids. Like if you're coming up, you need to make a statement. So if you get the chance to meet that promoter for 3 minutes, you need them to remember your name. You're right, and that was something you did really well. So you go to Byron Bay. And the part you don't touch on is that you decide you're going to leave this lifestyle, but it's one extreme to the other. So you go to this whole kind of like insane kind of party lifestyle, as we'll touch on before, and then you go on a bit of a spiritual journey.
Yeah.
So can you kind of explain us through that? And I know this spiritual journey goes for a long time. So like sort of start from the start and where you've gone, where you started, and sort of, I guess, where you are now.
Yeah. I mean, that time of my life looking back was interesting for a number of reasons. But like I said, decided to move up to Byron Bay. At that point, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. Like, there's still a couple of gigs coming in here or there. So I thought I'll have some money to buy me enough time until I figure out my next move. But we literally sold everything we had, bought this old Volkswagen van. We were the plan was we're going to live in this van for as long as until we find a place to live in Byron Bay. Had no clue what I was going to do. And I was just thinking to myself, well, what do I like, you know? And was into tattoos at the time. And was, you know, collecting tattoos. I had a whole list of artists all around the country that I wanted to sort of work with or get work from. And a couple of them were at this shop in Byron Bay. So I literally just messaged them on Instagram and said, do you have a job available? And they said, yep. So anyway, started working at the tattoo shop. Was basically living that sort of hippie Byron Bay lifestyle. Was vegan as well, which probably also is part of the reason why I drifted away from the nightlife, because it was a whole thing. It wasn't just the drinking. I went on this full 180 kind of health kick. Yeah. I was running, cycling, vegan, no drinking, like full straight edge. And so I wanted to just distance myself as much from the club life as possible. And then I guess like many people that have had those experiences in the past, you're looking for meaning, you're looking for, you know, what's next. And so, yeah, and Byron Bay is, as you know, no shortage of spiritual seekers. So I'd lap up everything. I'd go to Buddhist meditation classes. I'd go to the Hare Krishna village on the Sunday and have their big lunch. I'd go to, you know, Greek Orthodox church in Surfers Paradise. You know, all like I just sort of dabbled in everything. I was just trying to soak up as much as possible. And you know, I was atheist for a long time as a kid, but I'd always sort of been interested in religion.
You also were like a hardcore atheist. Like that's another thing I'll mention. Like from us knowing each other, you were very much like, I would almost go as far to say anti-religious. Like when you kind of did this whole thing, you know, like I kind of grew up and I would say it was like a little brother, sort of big brother process. I remember like times where I would like give you money in advance because you needed to get by or whatever. Like we had like a pretty strong relationship really. Yeah. And then you just did a 180. Yeah. And so for me, it was just like, what the fuck is going on with Mike? Yeah. And so, but you were non-religious, big drinker, like big partier, didn't have any form of sleep pattern, didn't exercise, you know, used to live off junk food, and then you just flip to this guy who does the complete opposite of all that sort of stuff. So you what made you, I know you said you were interested in religion prior to that, but like, what was the shift? Was there a shift, or you just discovering yourself?
I think honestly, it was a gradual progression. So atheist in the beginning, then, so the most appealing religion as an atheist would be Buddhism, because you can be a Buddhist and not believe in God. Buddhist scriptures don't refer to God. You know, Buddha was just this guy that lived in India, a prince that, you know, reached enlightenment. But, you know, I won't go through the whole story. But as an atheist, Buddhism is kind of the easiest religion to be able to swallow, because it's more just about, you know, meditation and you know, everyone has that ability to kind of expand their consciousness, for lack of a better term. So that was appealing in the beginning. I was living, you know, in Byron Bay. So I'd attend these meditation classes, but still in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't want anything to do with religion. This is just, I'm just learning how to meditate and trying to learn different techniques to, you know, be more peaceful, all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the gateway, I guess.
The gateway drug.
And then, but being the, you know, curious by nature, I'm researching in the background the history of Buddhism and how it started, and, you know, what was around before the time of Buddhism. So before Buddhism, the major religion in India was Hinduism, and there's so many crossovers between the two, and they both believe in karma and reincarnation and that sort of stuff. But Hinduism has a greater emphasis on, you know, deities, and they worship, you know, variety of different gods. So again, it started off as kind of, I'm just want to learn about this, want to understand like what makes people tick and why people believe what they want to believe. So I was just lapping up, you know, reading the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads and all these different scriptures. And like I said, going to the Hare Krishnas and chatting with the monks and getting to know their lifestyle. And I'm the type of person that I'm willing to give anything a go. And I wouldn't like, I'll kind of go where other people won't go, much like yourself. Like I'll take the road less traveled. So I have no problem kind of dabbling in things that other people would see as odd or out of the blue. So went down that path, you know, hanging out with the Hare Krishnas heaps. And
Did you become a Hare Krishna?
Not officially, like I wasn't initiated or anything, but there was a period probably for a good year where I'd be going there every Sunday. I'd be chanting, you know, they chant on the beads. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put this to the test. It doesn't need to be any sort of formal commitment, but, you know, let's see where this takes me. And so it was interesting.
You do the marches, like when they were like walk down the street and stuff?
I actually did a couple of times, like in Bharat, they call it Harinam when you go around the streets and sing. And it's so funny seeing people's reactions.
But why do they do it?
Well, the Hare Krishnas believe that the chanting of, they believe Krishna is the name of God. And so by chanting the names of God in public, basically, that if you were just to hear that you're going to get some sort of blessing. So they believe that basically that the ultimate goal of life is to spread, you know, God's name. And they do that by congregational chanting. I mean, you see it in the city in Melbourne all the time.
Of course. You don't see it as much as you used to, but yeah. For those that don't know, I'm sure everyone does, but it's a Hare Hare Krishna, and they have like the kind of like the monk attire, I guess, and they're like, it's all a mixture of like kind of all different nationalities all over the world. And do they have instruments? They don't have instruments, do they?
They've got like the little hand cymbals that they call kartals, and the mridanga, which is like a big drum kind of thing. They're the main instruments. So it was an interesting time, and
you start to shift from that. So then you go from that was like your Byron life, right? And then you return back to Melbourne.
Yeah, so I lived in Byron Bay for a couple of years, working at the tattoo shop, and then Jade and I were sort of talking about having kids, and weren't expecting for it to happen so quickly, but Jade fell pregnant with our daughter Billy, and you know, all our friends and family are down in Melbourne, so we always kind of knew that when it comes time to start our family, we'll move back down here. So Jade fell pregnant. I went to the owners of the tattoo shop and said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm gonna, you know, we're moving back to Melbourne. They were cool about it, so we moved back down here. And that's when I thought, right, now it's time to get real. You know, I've had my fun. I've done all these different things. I'm now becoming a father. And I always knew within myself, when I become a dad, that's when, like, I've got to get real. And, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm like, I don't have a university degree behind me. Done the music thing. I don't want to go back there. That's behind me. I don't want to really pursue the tattooing thing. What am I going to do? And fortunately, my father-in-law gave me a good opportunity just to buy some time. He said, he does vinyl flooring. He's been a floor layer for 25 years. He goes, look, it's not glamorous work. It's not enjoyable. It's probably not up your alley, but I know you've got a baby on the way, and, you know, would be happy to have you work with me for a while just until you figure out your next move. So I was like, that'd be awesome. So did that for a couple of years. And in the background, I'm just thinking, what am I going to do next? You know,
I reckon we might have reconnected around this point. I remember having these convos where you like didn't know exactly what was next for you.
Yeah. But I mean, you know me, you could imagine me like on a job site. I'm like a fish out of water.
I can imagine, yeah.
It's not really my thing, but because I didn't know what I was going to do, I just went along with it. And look, my father-in-law sort of looked after me because I'm married to his daughter. So I had no clue what I was doing, but he kind of paid me reasonably well just to keep me afloat. But he even said to me on day one, he goes, start planning your escape route now. He goes, you don't want to be stuck doing this when you're my age. Figure out your next move and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So every day I'd be on my hands and knees, you know, gluing up the floors. And I'm just thinking like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it's, you know, a bit of a sad story, but my wife's little brother, Josh, had brain cancer, which he struggled with for a while. He ended up passing away at age 9. And that was the first time, obviously horrific for the family, you know.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
But first time for me, like first time ever, we were with him when he passed away, and that was the first time that I'd had that experience, and was there like when the funeral directors came over and stuff like that. And look, I wasn't thinking about it clearly at the time because I was grieving, but I think it must have just planted a seed in my head, seeing the funeral directors in action. And so time goes on, and I was just looking around on Seek, and a funeral director position came up, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is it. I'm going to give this a go, and put my resume in and got a call, and I was shocked. I'm thinking, gee, they must be desperate, because if you look at my resume, it's like DJ, worked at a tattoo shop, and then floor layer. So it's not exactly the type of experience you'd expect for the funeral industry. But I'm so grateful that they gave me an opportunity, because I honestly can't see myself doing anything else now. I absolutely love it.
So to explain to people who don't exactly know what you do, what is your title? And then explain what you do. Like, what's a day-to-day look like for what you're currently doing now?
So I wouldn't have even told you this, but just in the last couple of weeks, I actually got a new role within the same company I'm working for. I'm actually moving into more of a coaching role, but that's brand new. So essentially what I've been doing for the last almost 4 years, if someone at a party or on the street said, "What do you do for a job?" I would say I'm a funeral director because that's what most people understand. But I guess the internal or the industry lingo would be a funeral arranger conductor. And all different funeral companies do it differently. If you go to a smaller company, they're more likely that the person that you meet with to arrange the funeral is also going to be doing the mortuary work. They're going to be driving the hearse. They kind of do a bit of everything. But I work for a larger organization, so there's lots of different roles and everyone sort of stays in their own lane, if that makes sense. So I'm basically the guy that you would meet with when you've lost a loved one. And this might sound weird, but it basically is like an event planning role with a bit of a compassionate twist. So essentially what I'm trying to get from that first meeting is after I've given the family an opportunity to share about their loved one and see how they're feeling and all that sort of stuff. But essentially what I'm trying to do is figure out what they want to do for their loved one. So is it going to be burial or cremation? Do they want it at a church or a chapel? Is there a religious element? Do they want booklets? Do they want photo slideshows? Do they want live streaming? Do they want dove releases? Do they want limos? The options are endless. Like as technology is advancing, funerals are becoming more and more complicated. And that's a skill in itself, not to overwhelm the family and to be able to sort of read what may be appropriate for them given their circumstances and their culture. I work in a super multicultural area, so I meet with all different types of families and nationalities, which I love. But yeah, essentially I arrange the funeral with the family. Typical turnaround from the first meeting to the funeral on average is about a week. So every day I'm checking in with the family, seeing how they're going emotionally, making sure they've got their photos organized and they're kind of just ticking along and doing what they need to do. And then on the day of the funeral, I conduct the service. So I'm not actually up there doing the public speaking. That's usually either a celebrant if they're non-religious or a priest or something if they're religious. So as the conductor, again, like the event manager, my first priority is the family. So they arrive, make sure they're comfortable, show them where they're going. We've got tissues, we've got waters, all that sort of stuff. I'd have a couple of staff on the day. I'd have a hearse driver. I'd have a couple of assistants. So they would come to me and say, "Michael, what do you want us to do?" So I might say, "John, I want you to open the doors for people, greet them, ask them to sign the memorial book. Sally, can you hand out the booklet?" So kind of just giving the staff on the day direction. Then the celebrant will arrive. So I'm sort of liaising with them, liaising with the catering staff, and just, making sure it all goes as smoothly as possible. So that's it in a nutshell. I've also got other responsibilities as site manager that I have to kind of look after the facility and the staff, but vast majority of my role day to day is arranging and conducting funerals.
Yeah, and so it's an interesting one because you kind of talked about it being an event planning. It's no different, right? So do you think that it's like similar to hospitality in a sense, like the way you have to manage it? Because obviously when you work in hospitality, your job is to connect with someone straight away. So it's not much different.
Yeah, building rapport with families is number one. And I was actually told from a more experienced staff member when I first started, he goes, if the family like you and you build their trust and they like you, you could just about drop the coffin on the day and they'll forgive you. Now, that's obviously an exaggeration, but the point is, if the family don't trust you or they don't like you or you rub them the wrong way for whatever reason, on the day of the funeral, your shoelace could be undone and they're going to complain about it. So that first 10, 15 minutes of meeting the family is crucial. And the hardest part of it is you don't know what you're walking into. Like, they could be absolutely devastated beyond belief if it's a tragic death or a suicide or a young person that's died. Generally, they're going to be really, really upset, as you would imagine. But then sometimes if it's a little old lady who's 98 and has been in a nursing home with dementia for 10 years, often the family there's a sense of relief. So, but until I meet them, I don't know what they're going to be like emotionally. So I have to assume the worst. And I just, I'll usually start by just saying, this is going to sound like a really stupid question, but can I ask how you're feeling, how you're holding up at the moment? And then tell me a little bit about mum or dad or whoever it may be. And that just gives them the opportunity to share. And I get the gist very quickly where they're at. And sometimes if I say, may I ask how you're holding up? Some people just go, "Yeah, I'm good. Yep, I'm okay." And then I'm like, right, they don't want to talk about it. And that's fine. It's not my job. I'm not a counselor, although it does end up feeling like that sometimes. I just gauge their response and kind of, follow their lead in that sense and do my best to kind of try and guide them through the whole process.
So you start this job, right? Going
Yeah.
back the whole way. Obviously, DJ into tattoo shop assistant, into potential tattoo artist, into funeral director.
Yeah.
It's got to be daunting. Like going into these families' homes that you don't know what it's going to be like. You're dealing with people who have just lost a loved one. Run us through like that kind of first experience you had where you were sort of like sailing the ship yourself.
Look, I'm lucky that the company that I work for, they do offer really good training and induction. It's not like first day, here you go, off you go and arrange a funeral. Like if you put someone in that situation, it would be a disaster, not only for the staff member, but for the family. So it was a good couple of months at least before I was actually solo in front of the family. And I sort of worked my way up. So I wouldn't be thrown into like a full, Italian Catholic burial, because there's a lot of moving parts in that sort of service. So generally you'll start off with a more simple type of service. We would call it a no service delivery. So that's when the family don't want a service. They just want a direct cremation. They may or may not have a party or a celebration of their loved one's life in their own time, but quite a few people just want us to organize the direct cremation. And
is that common?
Surprisingly, I started in COVID and it was very common then because there were only 10 people out at funerals. And for a lot of families, 10 people doesn't even cover the immediate family, let alone anyone else. So people are thinking, I'm not going to spend big bucks on this elaborate service when there's only 10 people that are going to come. So in COVID, we were doing a lot of no service cremations. That from a funeral director's point of view, they're probably the simplest type of service to arrange. So you sort of do a couple of them, and then you would work your way up to a chapel service followed by a cremation. And then, something like a church service with a burial, as I said, is more complicated. So it was step by step, but I'm not joking. Even to this day, sometimes after nearly 4 years, I pinch myself when I'm with a family and I go, I can't believe I'm in this situation. And the fact that these people are trusting me to arrange their mum or their dad or their brother or their sister's funeral, that novelty never wears off. And I genuinely take it really seriously because it's such an honor, like I don't think that will ever get old.
So were you nervous though the first time?
Oh, absolutely.
Shitting your pants?
Shitting myself. In my head, I'm thinking these people they're going to know that I don't have a clue what I'm doing. They're going to know that this is my first arrangement. I kind of was doubting myself, but there was no dramas whatsoever. And what I realized later is people don't give a shit how I'm feeling. They're the ones that have lost a loved one. So as long as I was one step ahead of them and I was able to sort of guide them through the process, they wouldn't have even been able to tell that I was nervous, because they're the one, like the fact that they're even walking into a funeral home to arrange their mum's funeral, they can't believe that they're there. So I think I put more pressure on myself than I should have. But I think it's good, it's probably good to have some level of nerves. You don't want to go in there and just, hey, how you going, because it is a serious thing. So,
yeah, I can imagine you've seen some pretty crazy stuff in your time. We'll sort of touch on some of it. I know some of it's probably like not street legal, but so we won't try not to go there. You can tell me where their line is. So the nationality stuff, like what's the major differences? Like I'm guessing you're dealing with all kinds of stuff. Like, can you kind of talk on that? Because I'm assuming they're completely different.
Oh, massively. And again, these are, well, I guess what I'll talk about these will be stereotypes, and within each culture and each nationality, there are variances and, all of that. So hopefully that goes without saying, but I don't want people to come at me going, that's not how we do it, But for example, the area that I work in, it's quite a large islander populations, lots of Samoans and Maoris and all this sort of stuff. And again, there's variances. Some of them are Mormons, some of them are Catholics, there's a whole variety. But what they commonly like to do is have their loved one in the family home for a few nights beforehand, which the first time I saw that, it was a shock, because in my culture, that's not really a thing. So the first time I took a deceased person into the family home in Cranbourne, and the way that the family had set it up, I was blown away. Like they'd sort of cleared the whole rumpus room in the front of the house. They'd gotten everyone's got custom made t-shirts, hats. They've got these big signs with the person's photo. Like they just went all out, and they must have hired a stage or something, and they've draped all these beautiful cloths over it. And the reverence that they have for their deceased is unmatched. And for them, it's normal. They have their loved one in the home. They'll all gather around. They have a big feast. They sing, and for some reason, they can all just sing like angels. I don't know, it's part of the culture, but they'll play guitar, and for them it's just normal. I remember afterwards like telling my family about it, and I'm like, imagine when grandma dies, if I said to my dad, hey, we're going to just bring her home and have her in the lounge room, he would think I was nuts. But for their culture, it's so normal, and I love it. I think it's so beautiful. I think having that sort of time with your loved one to grieve, it actually really helps with the grieving process. So that's one thing. I mean, with the Islanders as well, they do like to manually backfill the grave.
Yep.
So most of the time with a burial, after the burial's taken place, the grave diggers are sort of just hiding in the distance. They wait for everyone to leave, and then they come in with the machinery and backfill it. But the Islanders and some other cultures as well, I'll request from the cemetery to bring like 6 or 8 shovels, and they've all got their suits on and but they'll just, they'll backfill the grave, and for them it's a real honor. It's something that they can practically do to lay their loved one to rest, and it's powerful. So that's one thing. I mean, and so with Muslims, ideally, if a Muslim person dies in the morning, they want that person actually buried before sunset in an ideal world. Now, it doesn't always happen. We're not set up as well in Australia to sort of be able to do that, as opposed to, in the Middle East or other sort of more Muslim populated areas. But we do our utmost when it's a Muslim family to try and facilitate that. And they sort of cut out a lot of the process that us Westerners would associate with funerals. So for a typical Muslim farewell would be the person's passed away, they call us, we go to wherever they've died. We then take them directly to the mosque. Most mosques will have their own sort of facility where they can wash and anoint their deceased. So
who does that in their churches? Like their priests and stuff, or they have like undertakers inside the churches?
So for like churches and that sort of thing, usually we would, like our company, we have, full-time morticians, and that's all they do. They prepare the deceased. So usually we would take care of that. But with the Muslim families, they usually prefer that to be done at the mosque, because the family actually like to be more involved. That's another thing with cultures, like the Aussie culture or just Western culture in general. We've become really, really disconnected from grief. And it's like your loved one dies and all of a sudden you're scared to go near them, or you're scared to touch them. I'm just generalizing, but
for sure.
like
that's my background. Like I've had multiple family members lose, and like we meet the guy, then we go to the funeral, then they get cremated, and that's it. Yeah. And so it's like we kind of try to pass on and ignore it. It's like that's how we deal with it.
And that, like the undertaker, that's that whole term. It's like an undertaker is someone that basically undertakes a task that you wouldn't want to do yourself. So we take away the deceased, we prepare them, we wash them, we dress them, and then we place them in their coffin that the family have selected, and then we take them to the service. So that's kind of what happens most of the time. But with Muslim families, because of the quick turnaround and because of the fact that culturally they love to be involved in doing that themselves, it's part of their grieving, where they want to wash and dress their loved one. So it's usually we take them to the mosque, they wash them, they anoint them with oils that have certain significance, and then they'll generally wrap them in a simple white cotton shroud. They're then placed in a coffin that's used just for transportation purposes, because most Muslims don't get buried in a coffin, but we place them in a coffin so that when the hearse is driving down the Monash Freeway and someone's driving next to them, it would be pretty confronting if you looked into a hearse and you just saw a shrouded body. So we use a coffin for transportation, but then when we get to the cemetery, again, it's usually family involved, but there might be 6 or 8 guys. They will literally pick up the shrouded body out of the coffin, walk it over to the grave, and they have like a little ladder in the grave, and they just very gently place it in there, and they do a big congregational prayer at the graveside, and then lay that person to rest. So it's very, very different from how we as Westerners would typically view a funeral, but I find it really fascinating.
Same, like that is mind blowing to me. Like I've never even thought about that. So we would just say, is there like a certain culture that has like the most craziest, or would you say that sort of, is there like, like something that's like, I know this stuff's already kind of strange to me, but is there something that's even more unique?
I don't know. I mean, it depends how you define crazy, because it's each to their own, and every culture is unique.
Well, it's not crazy if you're a part of that culture, right?
Yeah. I mean, just to give you a complete contrast from what I've just described, from a very serious, somber, formal Muslim burial. I mean, and I could do one of those in the morning, and in the afternoon, I could have sort of more of a modern Aussie family, and they'll have the Richmond footy theme song as their loved ones wheeled out to the hearse. They'll put a stubby of VB on the coffin and a pack of Winnie Blues, and rather than waving off the hearse, they'll be like, "Fuck you," like I've seen that sort of thing, and I love that because that's that family. They wouldn't want anything serious. A church funeral or whatever is polar opposite to what they want. So when you say what's the craziest, it really, I can't really answer it because everyone's so different.
Yeah.
I see so many different things.
It's such a unique perspective. I never even had thought about, like, I've obviously seen Samoan ones, but like
Yeah.
I've not attended, but like they do hackers and stuff too, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite often.
Yeah, I've kind of put that on my list of, if I pass away, I've told the guys I know who are islanders they have to do it. They're like, all right, whatever.
Yeah. And again, even though I see it quite often, it always gives me chills and brings a tear to my eyes. It's so powerful and moving.
It's so cool. I know you and I are both very much the same in this aspect, hence why we've had such a long-term relationship. But I love this stuff. Like, this is so interesting to me, hearing, like, I could literally sit here and listen to you tell me every single culture's unique burial processes and not get bored, I don't reckon. So another one would be like the costing, right? So as a funeral director, I'm assuming that like there's a low amount of cost and there's a high amount of cost. Like where does it sort of start and how high does it get?
It varies so much. And look, I can only speak for the company that I work for, but most companies will have, different structures for different types of services. So before I talked about a no service cremation, that would obviously be on the cheaper end because there's less staff required, less work required. It's mainly just handling the legalities and the preparation of the deceased and the cremation itself. So that would be the cheapest side of it. Then there's a single service, which would be a service in typically in a chapel followed by a cremation, and then a dual service, which is often a service in a chapel or a church followed by a burial. Dual service is more expensive. Mainly the pricing comes down to how involved we need to be in the staffing. So when I say dual service, I mean that we're staffing the service at the church or the chapel, and then our staff are also facilitating the burial as well. So that's obviously more expensive because it takes out our team for pretty much the whole day, whereas a single service, we may be able to offer 2 services on the same day. So, but every brand is different. The brands that are situated in the market, some are premium, some are kind of, middle of the road, and some are more cost effective. And I feel like anything, you get what you pay for. Like the company I work for is not the cheapest in the world, but and sometimes we'll lose families that are looking for the cheapest option, and that's fine. Each to their own. And obviously, it's not cheap to die. That's the reality of it, And some people, especially if the death is unexpected, they may not be able to come up with the money. And so, they may want this elaborate service, but finances might not be able to get them there. And so they've got to kind of do the best with what they have.
What's the process of I pass away in my house, right? What's the process from when you guys come in to how it all goes? Obviously, the ambulance takes them away, go to the coroner, I'm assuming. Then what happens from there? Like, what is that space? Like, I've had loved ones die, but I don't even know. Like, all I know is that they've been picked up from their house, and then towards the end of it, I've gone to a funeral. So what is the actual process between, I guess, death in a home, let's say for argument's sake, to a funeral?
Yeah, a good question, and it can take different turns depending on the circumstances. But what you just said, for example, if you were to die at home, and let's say your wife was to call the funeral director, the funeral director is essentially wanting to know the details of the person who's calling, and then the person that's passed away. So obviously your name, your date of birth, where are you at the moment? Now, if your wife said he's at home, if I was on the other end of the call, my first thought would be, has somebody been to verify the death? So that could be, sometimes it's often a paramedic, or it could be a doctor, but someone needs to verify that you've died. If you haven't been to a doctor for the last few months and you don't have any underlying health concerns, then most of the time you're going to go to the coroner because it would be considered suspicious, or reportable death. So usually if you die at home, often you go to the coroners. The only real difference is if you just say you're 89, you've had cancer or some sort of terminal illness for a long time, and you've been seeing a doctor regularly and you died at home, then in most cases you probably wouldn't have to go to the coroner. But if you go to the coroners, essentially we then need to get what's called a coroner's case number from the family member, because the coroners won't give us any information until they know for sure that the family have engaged us, because it's all about privacy, right? So I would never ask for the case number from the family until I'm confident that they actually do want to go ahead with us. But once they give us that case number, We then liaise with the coroners, and we just get a daily status update on where they're at in terms of their autopsy or whatever process the coroner needs to do. And then once that's been complete, we then arrange to have their person brought into our care from the coroners as soon as possible. But the coronial process can take a long time. You know, sometimes it's only 2 or 3 days, sometimes it's several weeks, depending on how the person's died and how busy the coroners are. And that makes it difficult for the funeral director, but also obviously for the family, because their loved ones at the coroners, they're grieving. They want to book the service in, but I can't really book a service for them because we don't know when their loved one's going to be released. If we book it next week and they don't get released from the coroners, then we have to postpone things. And so it does make it challenging when they go to the coroners. But if someone's passed away at an aged care home, for argument's sake, usually or a hospital, you know, again, we'll arrange to have them brought into our care as soon as possible.
So when you say brought into the care, right, and I'm really kind of getting interesting here, but is this like a fridge truck that's picking people up? Tell me that.
Yeah. So again, different companies do it differently, but we have drivers on the road pretty much 24/7. They drive around in, it's just like a plain white van, you know, sort of unmarked, blacked out. You wouldn't know if you drove past it. It just looks like an average white Toyota van. So they drive around, as I said, 24/7. And if someone's passed away, our head coordination team would notify them. And depending where they are on the road, they're usually going to be there.
And they're refrigerated?
The vans, not necessarily, no, but they will pick, some of them are, but generally when we pick the person up, we'll take them back to our mortuary facility, you know, and it's not going to take very long to get from where they are to the mortuary, and then they're refrigerated from there. So we've got a mortuary facility. When I say brought into our care, that's what I mean.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying.
Go in a van and then they go to our mortuary and they're refrigerated until the morticians prepare them and wash them and dress them and everything like that.
Digging into it again. So when you say prepare them, what do you mean? Like, is that like, I know it's gross, but like, what is it?
Yeah. Again, this is a conversation that the funeral director has to have with the family. So what I mean is, if I was meeting with your wife to discuss your funeral and I didn't know you, let's pretend, I would be asking her, so was Danny usually clean shaven, or did he have a bit of stubble? You know, or if it's, you know, I could say, did he ever, how did he wear his hair? Can you show me a photo of what he would look like? So even though I'm not doing the preparation myself, it's helpful for the mortuary team to get an idea of what you look like. And again, depending on the circumstances of the death, if you passed away now and you're in our care, in our mortuary within a couple of hours, the level of preparation wouldn't be as much. But if someone has died at home, they live by themselves, they've died at home and they haven't been found for 2 weeks, the gardener might find them or something like that, which happens, unfortunately. Obviously, the preparation for someone like that is a lot more involved because decomposition has set in. And I'm guided by my mortuary staff because they're the professionals. If I've met with a family, I always ask them, you know, would you like to spend some time with your loved one before the service? In other words, would you like to have a viewing? But if my mortuary manager says to me, look, we've just been preparing this person, they're not in a good way, it would potentially be traumatic for the family, so I would highly recommend that they don't view their loved one, I then have to relay that information to the family. And sometimes it's really tough, especially if it's a parent that's lost their child. Doesn't matter what sort of state they're in, they want to see their loved one. And at the end of the day, I can only advise them, but if they want to, I can't stop them. So it makes it tough. But in terms of the preparation, generally, it's a hygienic preparation. So washing, bathing, blow drying the hair, you know, applying makeup if necessary, shaving if required, all that kind of stuff. What they call setting the features, which is essentially, you know, making sure the mouth and the eyes are closed. And just making them look as peaceful as possible. That's sort of the idea of the preparation. But for example, if someone's being repatriated, so if they've died in Melbourne, but I did one recently to Romania, where their family wanted their loved one to be buried in Romania. If a deceased person's going on an aeroplane, the airline want to see a certificate of full embalming. So that's a whole other process, and it's a lot more involved. But that basically slows down that natural decomposition process and prepares the deceased or sort of preserves them so that they're able to hold up while they're on that aeroplane until they get to their home country. Another example is if at a cemetery. Do you know what a mausoleum is?
No idea.
You know, it's like an above ground crypt.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
For some reason, you know, Italians often go for mausoleums. I think that's quite common over in Italy and other countries, but it's a big above ground crypt, not under the ground. So it's sort of like a concrete hole in the wall, essentially. And again, most cemeteries require full embalming for a mausoleum interment, because sometimes the mausoleums are indoors. And you could imagine if you walked into a mausoleum that's indoors and it's summer and these deceased people hadn't been embalmed, the smell that would be coming would be horrific. So it's kind of like it's for hygienic purposes, essentially.
Do they close those doors eventually?
What, in the mausoleum?
Yeah. Or can you walk in them whenever?
Oh yeah, no, they get locked at a certain time. But throughout the day, you know, people can come and go as they please to visit their loved one, just like you would at a graveside.
Cool. All right. So can you share, be it, you know, strangest or awesome or crazy story of your time being a funeral director?
It's hard because given the nature of what I do, I've got to be very careful about not giving away, you know, personal information or even anything that could link it to a particular family,
Totally
just out of
respect that.
respect for their privacy.
Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time, which I'm shattered because I would love to ask another 500 questions, and maybe I will. Maybe there's a second part to this one. I just solely kind of relying onto this whole nature of humanity. But your journey has been amazing, from going from a nightlife professional DJ, musician, producer who played a big part in people's upbringings and life, who no doubt want to know what you're up to what you're doing now, which is like, I guess, helping families and working in a space that is very fucking unique. Like, that's the only way I can explain it. And again, people don't know, but you're really young. So you're probably one of the young, I'm guessing one of the youngest funeral directors in Australia?
Oh, look, I don't have the stats on that, but just judging from the colleagues around me, yeah, definitely on the younger end for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So you've gone into this different path that your original trajectory from 18 probably didn't really lead into, right? So thanks for sharing this story, Mike. I know we went through all kinds of different trials and tribulations throughout that yarn, and it was fucking amazing. I have to do the bit that I have to do to keep the lights on. Firstly, I know you don't drink anymore, but I still have to promote this because they help pay the bills. WPshots, born in clubs, made for everywhere, at Liquorland first choice, and all good independents. Second to that, Astello. Believe it or not, this is a brand owned by a couple of Melbourne promoters, and they're dominating. Super good quality. Go check them out, www.astello.com.au. I guarantee you, if you don't like their threads, I'll buy your t-shirt. And then last but not least, AAA Digital. If you have a hospitality business, a festival, or you have an event that you're trying to fucking expand or blow up or whatever, AAA Digital is the company for you. Experts in ads and growth in business. So check them out. If you're an upcoming promoter or you're an established promoter, that is the company for you. So thank you, Mark, for coming down today. And thank you for listening to that long-winded ad. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, Danny. It's been fun.